right now. Arming Ukraine. President Trump's about-face on aid to the embattled nation, the new weapons plan in their bitter war with Russia, and the latest in Trump's brewing standoff with Putin.
We've made a deal today where we are going to be sending them weapons and they're going to be paying for them.
Plus, new details on that massive raid on a California cannabis farm and who exactly was arrested. And relentless rain, the obstacle search crews face following one of Texas's worst tragedies in recent memory.
And you have to search everything because you're looking for any sign.
Thank you so much for joining us here on NewsNation Now. I'm Nick Smith in for Nichole Berlie. We begin this hour following a major announcement from the president on the war in Ukraine. Just moments ago, President Trump announcing a new weapons plan which will provide Ukraine with both defensive and offensive weapons, while making it clear that the EU, not the United States, will be paying for those weapons. The plan comes as a major shift for the president, who had previously criticized support to Ukraine. Just months ago, this fiery Oval Office interaction between President Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky filled headlines, making many believe support for Ukraine was coming to a close.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. Remember this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
Feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position.
Now, instead, it's Vladimir Putin who is facing the ire of the president, who has dramatically increased strikes on Ukraine since President Trump took office, with seemingly no interest in a ceasefire. President Trump warning Russia it has 50 days to come to the negotiating table or face severe tariffs from the United States.
And I'm disappointed in President Putin because I thought we would have had a deal 2 months ago, but it doesn't seem to get there. So based on that, we're going to be doing secondary tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. It's very simple. And they'll be at 100%. And that's the way it is. That can be more simple. It's just the way it is. I hope we don't have to do it.
News Nation's Kelly Meyer is live at the White House with the very latest on this announcement. Kelly, good afternoon. Strong words coming from the president.
Yeah, and such a shift in tone, as you pointed out there, Nick, on not only Ukrainian President Zelensky and shifting his frustration towards Russian President Vladimir Putin, but also on his stance with NATO and having this good relationship with NATO, when previously he was critical of them. So President Trump called this a very big day, a major deal between the U.S. and NATO happening just moments ago. President Trump announcing the U.S. will be sending weapons to NATO. NATO will then send them on to Ukraine. And the key in this is that NATO will be paying for the weapons. So inside the Oval Office a short time ago, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte joined President Trump for this announcement. Rutte says Germany, Finland, Canada, Norway, Sweden, the UK, and Denmark are among the buyers to supply Ukraine. He says that speed is of the essence here. And Rutte and President Trump both hope that this move will move Russian President Putin closer to peace talks.
We're going to make top-of-the-line weapons, and they'll be sent to NATO.
This is really big. This is really big.
And while President Trump was meeting with NATO's leader in Washington, his special envoy to Ukraine was meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky in Kiev. Zelensky says it was a productive conversation. They discussed air defenses and sanctions against Russia. So this is something that we're going to continue to watch, this relationship between Zelensky and Trump, as well as how Putin plays into this and how he responds next. Nick.
Kelly, quick question for you. What more do we know about the sanctions that could be placed on Russia? We heard Mr. Trump mention that.
Yeah, another big moment in that Oval Office meeting with the NATO Secretary General, President Trump promising severe tariffs on Russia if there is no deal in 50 days. He says these would be secondary tariffs, meaning on those countries that trade with Russia. President Trump suggesting 100% tariffs. He also revealed that he speaks to Putin, quote, a lot, but says it's all just talk coming from him. President Trump wouldn't go as far to call Putin an assassin, but he says he's, quote, a tough guy. And President Trump says he thought they would have had a deal a long time ago. And as we've seen, he's grown tired of waiting for that deal. Take a listen.
I'm disappointed in President Putin because I thought we would have had a deal 2 months ago, but it doesn't seem to get there. So based on that, we're going to be doing secondary tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. It's very simple. And they'll be at 100%.
So if I was Vladimir Putin today and hear you speaking about what you were planning to do in 50 days and this announcement, I would reconsider whether I should not take negotiations about Ukraine more seriously.
Yeah, so saying both with the weapon shipments and with the sanctions or the threat of additional sanctions, that this should force Putin to reconsider the negotiation process. President Trump also saying that the Senate Republican Majority Leader would be here at the White House today, alluding to more discussions of those potential sanctions. Nick?
There is a lot happening this afternoon. Kelly Meyer with the very latest. Kelly, thank you so much. For more insight, let's bring in David Tafuri, former State Department official and former Obama campaign foreign policy advisor. David, I know that you watched that press conference with bated breath just like we did. What was your major takeaway from what Mr. Trump had to say?
Well, he generally said the right things if he wants to try to actually get an agreement between Ukraine and Russia. The reason is that what is missing is more pressure on Putin and on Russia. And so he talked about two areas that are going to result in pressure on Putin. One is providing more weapons, American-made weapons. President Trump talked about the importance of our weapons making it to Ukraine, especially sophisticated weapon systems like the Patriot missile system. And then he talked about economic impact and economic punishment to Russia. Now, he called it secondary tariffs. I think he's referring to secondary sanctions, meaning sanctions on those countries that do business with Russia. We have already restricted business between the United States and Russia largely through our sanctions. But secondary sanctions would then make it much harder for companies of countries that do not have sanctions on Russia to do business with Russia. This is especially important because these companies are who make it possible for Russia to sell its oil and to deliver its oil to other countries. And as we know, a lot of the revenue that Russia gets that it puts into building weapons and weapon systems to attack Ukraine comes from its oil revenues. So it's the two things combined, the economic measures and the weapons support to Ukraine that will result in significant pressure on Russia and help make Russia realize that they cannot win this war, that the United States and NATO allies in Europe are resolved to help Ukraine until there's an ending that is beneficial to Ukraine, that meets the aspirations of the Ukrainian people, not the ending that Putin wanted, which was a ceasefire where all of the terms are the terms that he is dictating.
And the land that he's already seized. You know, David, we just showed a graphic of some of the firepower that the United States would be sending to Ukraine or has already sent to Ukraine. And we're talking about some serious firepower there. We're talking about everything from that Patriot missile interceptors to the precision-guided rockets, the Hellfire missiles, howitzers, javelins. These are things that could truly shift the momentum of that war.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, all of those weapons are already on the battlefield, and Ukraine has received a lot of them from the United States. For instance, the javelins were really important, especially initially after the invasion by Russia, because Ukraine used the javelins very effectively to take out Russian tanks. The Patriot missiles are super important because they make it very hard for Russia to do airstrikes against Ukraine. We knock down Russian missiles with Patriot missiles, and also it makes it hard for Russia to fly its aircraft over Ukraine when there are Patriot missiles that can take down aircraft as well. As howitzers are also super important. Ukraine needs more of them. It needs both the howitzers and it needs more ammunition. So this is good news for Ukraine. It's good news for the NATO allies that really wanted to see a step up in support to Ukraine. And I think this could have a significant impact on the battlefield. And hopefully it's going to help Russia realize that they really can't take on the weight and the resources of NATO when the United States is participating in support for Ukraine.
David, I do want to ask you, though, why do you believe the shift in tone from Mr. Trump? You and I both know not even 3-4 years ago, previous administrations were saying that Mr. Trump was Putin's puppet.
Well, President Trump explained that a little bit in the press avail today. He basically said that he talks to Putin all the time and that he has these great talks with Putin. And after he gets off the phone with Putin, he goes and talks to the First Lady Melania, and he says, I had a great conversation with Putin. And then Melania points out to him, yeah, but Russia just did more airstrikes, significant airstrikes on Ukraine. And so Trump was saying, I don't know if I can believe Putin anymore. Now, he's a bit slow to the uptake. I think most people realized 10 years ago that we couldn't take Putin for his word, but it seems like Trump is recognizing that now, and in particular because right after conversations he has with Putin that he thinks went well, Putin seems to do things that are out of character with what they discussed in the conversation.
And David, you touched on it, but I want to go into these 100% tariffs that Mr. Trump said would go into effect if no deal is reached with Russia. You're talking about an additional sanction, say, like on China and other countries that trade with Russia, correct?
That's right. What the secondary sanctions would do is it would basically take what are U.S. sanctions and put those U.S. sanctions on countries and the companies of those countries. Even though the countries have not signed up to the U.S. sanctions, those companies could no longer do business with American companies, and they could no longer access the American banking system. So if you're, for instance, a company from India or from China, you don't have sanctions on Russia. Your country permits you to do business with Russia, but if the secondary sanctions go in place, you can no longer do any business with American companies or any other countries that sign up to U.S. sanctions or similar sanctions because of the secondary sanctions.
And that would definitely hit Russia's bottom line. David Tafuri, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
President Trump standing by his attorney general and top officials at the FBI as the Jeffrey Epstein controversy shows no sign of easing anytime soon. The rift within the Justice Department bursting into the open late last week after AG Pam Bondi decided not to release additional records from his sex trafficking investigation into the deceased financier. The move is not sitting well with the top leadership at the FBI and some of the president's most vocal and loyal supporters. Outrage at Bondi and the president was on display this weekend at the Conference of Young Conservatives in Florida. Let's take a listen.
I blame Pam Bondi. She has never missed an opportunity to go on television and dangle sweet nothings that might be coming your way. Try to lead you to believe that she's got it, it's on her desk, it's coming tomorrow, you're gonna see something on Epstein. She's either lying now or she was lying then. There's no two ways about it.
What is it about Jeffrey Epstein that's so infuriating to people? It's the frustration of normal people watching a certain class of people get away with everything every single time.
NewsNation's Joe Khalil joins us live with more on this. Joe, I really thought this would die down over the weekend, and it has done anything but.
No, in fact, we've only seen it get even more intense. Nick, something is clearly happening here. As you showed all those clips with the MAGA base, they are not happy about this and not letting it go. Ever since last week, when the Department of Justice and the FBI put out that joint memo that said Jeffrey Epstein definitively did commit suicide, that there will be no more disclosures from his case, and that this alleged Epstein client list that reportedly had names of people on it does not exist. Ever since that moment, we have seen this continue to gain steam, and it has certainly not gone away. Even today, we still do not know whether the deputy director of the FBI, Dan Bongino, is showing up for work. Last week, all week, he was not there. NewsNation had confirmed that out of frustration, actually. And we just got a White House statement within the last hour, the White House saying President Trump has assembled an incredible team of law and order patriots who are committed to making America safe again and restoring the integrity of the criminal justice system. Attorney General Bondi, Director Patel, Deputy Director Bongino, and countless other heroes of our law enforcement are dedicated to executing President Trump's agenda. Nonetheless, this is obviously still going on here. And just last night, President Trump commented on the situation with Deputy Director Bongino. This is what the president had to say.
Dan Bongino, very good guy. I've known him a long time. I've done his show many, many times.
and he sounded terrific, actually. No, I think he's in good shape.
As you played off the top, there has been a lot of frustration specifically with the Attorney General, Pam Bondi. President Trump has tried to come to her rescue here on Truth Social over the weekend, saying, what's going on with my boys, in some cases gals, going after AG Pam Bondi, who's doing a fantastic job. We are on one team, MAGA, and I don't like what's happening. The reason a lot of the frustration from the MAGA base and from others is directed at Bondi is because it wasn't long ago, months ago, that she did an interview where she was asked about the Epstein client list and actually said it is on my desk pending review. She has since clarified and said what she meant was that all of the Epstein files were on her desk and that all of them that are allowed to be released have since been released. So that's part of the frustration here. Nick, we can tell you that on Capitol Hill today, as we continue to cover this and ask questions about it, certainly the issue has not diminished despite the efforts from the White House to sort of turn the page on the Epstein situation.
Joe, you're talking about there on Capitol Hill. There's discussion in Congress right now, right, about possibly taking legislative action on Epstein?
Yeah, there is. So Democrat Congressman Vesey actually is going to be introducing a resolution today in the House that he says would basically demand that all of the Epstein files be released. And you see it here. He says that President Trump and his acolytes either fueled rumors of the significance of these Epstein files to help his campaign, or something is there. So Democrats sort of seeing this political opportunity, trying to capitalize on that. Over in the Senate, by the way, just last week, you had one Senator, Van Hollen, who actually introduced an amendment to the appropriations bill. And the amendment was for the DOJ to preserve all Epstein documents. And that amendment actually passed unanimously, Republican and Democrat supporting that. So it is not one side here. There is clearly some interest in figuring out what else has not yet been released as part of the Epstein case, as part of these files, although the Attorney General, again, saying that everything that has been released is it. There will be no more. So we're going to see how this plays out.
It seems as though the ghost of Epstein continues to haunt from the grave, Joe. Joe Khalil, live in Washington. Joe, thank you so much. Coming up, AutoPen. Former President Biden strikes back at accusations his aides made unauthorized decisions on his behalf.
I was barely able to get in there and grab a couple of my belongings and get out of there before the whole place just filled with water.
Plus, relentless rain in central Texas, the new flood warning, and how it's hampering search efforts following the state's historic flooding.
I love what I do, which is help people make the switch to consumer cellular, like our customers Courtney and Jackie.
Anytime anybody complains about their cell phone bill, we say, you've got to check out Consumer Cellular.
Consumer Cellular gives you access to a fast, reliable, nationwide network for up to half the cost of big wireless.
My previous provider was terrible.
Why are we paying this much for our cell phone bill? It's crazy, right?
Dropped calls or missed calls. To me, that was just normal.
We wouldn't get to talk to a person. Now with Consumer Cellular, no problems.
Our reception is so much better with Consumer Cellular. It's been amazing.
I just made a road trip across half the country, and I did not have one dropped call.
Better customer service. They tell me exactly what I'm paying and why I'm paying for it.
And here's my favorite part. You can save up to half on your bill.
It's within $1 of being half of my old bill.
With Verizon, I was paying about $150 a month. With Consumer Cellular, I'm paying about half that.
As AARP members, we get 2 lines for $55 a month.
I'm getting the exact same coverage for half the price. That's a beautiful thing.
Done deal.
We'll set you up with the best plan for you and help you wrap things up with your old provider. It all takes about 20 minutes.
Switching over took about 20 minutes. That's it.
Consumer Cellular customer service reps are A1, top notch.
They are so nice. You get a human being to talk to.
It's month to month, very simple.
You're not locked in.
I got to keep my phone. I got to keep my number.
If you're thinking about switching providers, do it.
If I can do it, you can't.
That's why I love Consumer Cellular. They've made it easy.
We'd love for you to enjoy our reliable nationwide coverage and the best customer service in the business. Give us a call now and start saving up to half on what you're paying now. It only takes about 20 minutes. Call 800-667-6105 to switch and save up to half with Consumer Cellular. Plus, new customers can save $25 when they switch today.
NetCredit is here to say yes, even when other lenders won't. Apply online in minutes and get funds deposited the next business day or sooner. NetCredit. Credit to the people.
Do you have a yo-yo smile? Sometimes yellow, sometimes white. It's a constant battle between everyday stains and whitening treatments. Until now, get Smile Actives, the daily teeth whitening breakthrough that gives you a more youthful smile and helps you keep it.
If you could use something so easy like Smile Actives to take yellow teeth to white teeth, why wouldn't you?
Just add Smile Actives to your favorite toothpaste and watch the magic happen. Our patented Polyclean microfoam lifts away deep stains for a dramatically younger and whiter smile.
You have a choice. You can have those yellow teeth and just be old Nana or Pop-Pop. I love my white teeth.
Clinically shown to brighten your teeth 5 shades whiter in just 7 days. Smile Actives lifts away even the toughest stains from coffee, wine, and food. Get Smile Actives for just $24.95 and we'll double your order. Free. Smile Actives is guaranteed to work. Whiten your teeth or get your money back. No questions asked. Scan the code, go to smileactives.com or call to get your beautiful whiter smile now.
July 27th, the CW goes bananas when the Savannah Bananas come to the CW in their broadcast network debut. The Savannah Bananas take on the Texas Tailgaters, Sunday, July 27th, live, only on the CW.
Welcome back. 20 minutes after the hour, search teams are back in Central Texas this morning looking for victims of the deadly flooding earlier this month. A new round of flooding and heavy rain halting some of those search efforts over the weekend. A flood watch is in effect right now for Kerrville, which saw the worst damage and the most deaths from July's 4th flooding. The raging floodwaters killing at least 132 people over 6 counties. 166 still remain missing statewide. NewsNation's Xavier Walton joins me now with more from Kerrville. Xavier, this continues to be a tough story to tell.
Nick, it is, it's an impossible story to tell. And here's the thing with the flood potential, the rain in the forecast, you know, it only gets more difficult for these search and recovery crews. And as that death toll, you know what, it continues to climb. So does the amount of crosses here being put up along the Guadalupe River. As you go this way here to our left, gentleman we just spoke with in the cowboy hat, his name is Robert. He was putting these up yesterday in the middle of a heavy downpour, in the middle of the rain. He said he had to, and he's doing it again right now. I went over there just a few minutes ago and I spoke to him and I asked, you know, there's going to be a lot of crosses. How many are you going to put up? That he didn't have the answer to, but what he's doing right now is he actually said he's actually putting up the crosses for the girls from Camp Mystic. And as we keep panning to the right here, something else, you know, we just noticed here, we're along the Guadalupe River, down there towards the bottom, Daniel, just another, you know, reminder, a pink trunk. And we now know, obviously, trunks and camps are synonymous. But the search, it continues for those people that are still missing. We'll just kind of pan the camera around and just let you show all the different sights and sounds. People are coming up here to pay their respects. A lot of emotion out here. But as that search continues, even just 20 minutes ago, we had a Black Hawk helicopter overhead. Residents along the Guadalupe River certainly paying very close attention to everything that is happening. Everyone is seemingly impacted. That includes a resident we spoke to a while ago. His name is Bill Baker. Take a listen.
They found bodies, well, upstream, not too far from here, and the body was buried. I mean, they had to find it with the help of the dogs, and they dug the body out. And then, of course, downstream, they found bodies, and those, I think, were above ground. But, yeah, they've been searching the river nonstop. There'll be large groups of men, like 18 or 20 of them, and they'll have dogs, and they'll have equipment, and they'll be picking through things carefully. And of course, we see the team we think is a rescue team, and we'll see them racing down the road one way, and supposedly they've found somebody probably, and then maybe an hour later they'll be racing down the other direction. So every time we hear them going, it's sad. We know what's going on.
So that's playing out all along the Guadalupe River. Something else, Nick, that Bill was telling me, You know, we're more than a week out now since this happened, since July 4th. He's already been to a couple of funeral services. That's the harsh reality. And so as search and recovery teams are still desperately trying to find missing loved ones, you know, others are being laid to rest. And that's the kind of closure that these crews out here are trying to provide for everybody.
Xavier, that's also part of the challenge. You mentioned how the conditions are difficult. What are they telling you on the ground, those who are actually still searching to find missing people with all this rain?
All the rain definitely does hamper the situation. Obviously, yesterday there was a pause in the search and recovery efforts. I actually put in a call to a crew from Ohio. They drove some 30-plus hours just to get here, and they're still here. They have a cadaver dog, and the handler was telling me essentially that it is the dogs right now that are playing the biggest role in kind of holding everything together, because, you know, the harsh reality is a lot of these bodies that remain missing are, you know, these people are buried, and it's really the dogs that are the ones that are still able to keep that search going, at least for now. But that's really the hardest part right now, Nick, is just continue to search every single part, and that includes underground as well.
And only a pause right now because, as you said, those who are there on the ground are dedicated to finding every missing person. Xavier Walton, live for us in Central Texas. Xavier, thank you. Still to come, what President Biden has to say about AutoPen and where he had knowledge about how his signature was being used. And last week's massive raid on a California cannabis farm, who federal authorities netted ahead.
CUOMO, tonight, 8/7 Central, only on NewsNation.
So what are you thinking?
I'm thinking about our honeymoon. What about Africa? Safari. Swim with elephants. Hot air balloon. Lions growling in the giraffes that come in through your window. Wait, can we afford a safari?
Great question. Like everything, it takes a little planning.
Or put the money towards a down payment.
With enough room for a baby?
Babies.
Baby.
Let's take a look at those scenarios.
JP Morgan Wealth Management has advisors in Chase branches and tools like Wealth Plan to help keep you on track. When you're planning for it all, the answer is JP Morgan Wealth Management.
Your mental health is better. But having uncontrollable body movements called TD, tardive dyskinesia, can feel embarrassing.
I asked my doctor about treating my TD with Ingrezza.
#1 prescribed Ingrezza is clinically proven to treat TD, quickly reducing TD movements by greater than 5 times at 2 weeks. 98% of people were still satisfied with Ingrezza after 2 years, and you can keep taking most mental health meds.
Ingrezza can cause depression, suicidal thoughts, or actions in patients with Huntington's disease. Call your doctor if you become depressed, have sudden behavior or mood changes, or suicidal thoughts. Don't take Ingrezza if allergic. Serious side effects may include allergic reactions like sudden, potentially fatal swelling and hives, sleepiness, the most common side effect, and heart rhythm problems. Know how Ingrezza affects you before operating a car or dangerous machinery. Report fever, stiff muscles, or problems thinking, as these might be life-threatening. Shaking, stiffness, drooling, and trouble with moving or balance may occur.
Taking control starts with asking your doctor about Ingrezza.
Ingrezza.
Honey?
Wait, what?
With COVID-19 and my heart disease, I'm not going to wait. If it's COVID, Paxlovid.
Paxlovid is an oral treatment for adults with mild to moderate COVID-19 and a high risk factor for it becoming severe. It does not prevent COVID-19.
My symptoms are mild now. I'm not risking it.
Paxlovid must be taken within the first 5 days of symptoms and helps stop the virus from multiplying in your body. Taking Paxlovid with certain medicines can lead to serious or life-threatening side effects or affect how it or other medicines work, including hormonal birth control. Tell your doctor about all medicines, vitamins, and herbal supplements you take, as certain tests or dosage changes of your other medicines may be needed. Tell them if you have kidney or liver problems, HIV-1, are or plan to be pregnant or breastfeed. Don't take Paxlovid if allergic to its ingredients. Stop taking and call your doctor right away if you have allergic reaction symptoms. Serious side effects can include allergic reactions, some severe like anaphylaxis and liver problems. These are not all the possible side effects, so talk to your doctor.
If it's COVID, Paxlovid.
Ask your doctor today.
Are you ready for an electric joyride? It's just a few clicks away. Introducing electric e-bikes. Experience what it's like to feel like a kid again. And feel confident with the best-selling electric bike in the U.S. We have every type of bike for every type of rider. Ships to your doorstep for free. Little to no assembly required. Hop on to your next adventure. Only at electricebikes.com. Electric e-bikes. Affordably awesome.
CUOMO Glow just cleaned my entire house for $19. Seriously, $19. They showed up right on time, did my dishes, my laundry, they even cleaned my windows. You just pick a date, pick a cleaner, and enjoy a spotless house for $19. I love using CUOMO Glow, and I think you will too.
I can feel the winds of change.
"29 minutes after the hour, former President Joe Biden is re-entering the spotlight after weeks in the shadows, defending his legacy and what he calls false claims of his administration's use of the auto pen. In an interview with the New York Times, Mr. Biden said he, quote, made every decision, asserting that he and his staff used an auto pen replicating his signature on clemency warrants because of the number of people it involved. This comes as he tries to fend off allegations from the current administration that Mr. Biden's staff took presidential actions on Mr. Biden's behalf. The claims swirling around Mr. Biden and his mental acuity were, according to many, a big part of why Mr. Biden stepped aside toward the end of the 2024 presidential campaign. The details behind all of that and much more, all captured in a new book, 2024, How Trump Retook the White House and the Democrats Lost America, written by Josh Dawsey, Tyler Pager, and Isaac Arnsdorf, who is joining me this afternoon. Isaac, good afternoon. You know that this book has stirred a lot of feathers in Washington.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. What we tried to do here is tell the complete story of the whole campaign, all three campaigns, from beginning to end. And one of the major things we found is how easily things could have gone the other way from the beginning of Biden and Trump, whether they were going to run again in 2024 or not. And not face serious challenges from both of their parties, who for a time were eager to move on from them.
Isaac, a lot of the reason why Mr. Biden chose to or not chose to run centered on his mental acuity. Along with that came accusations of maybe use of the auto pen in his stead. Mr. Trump just spoke about that. Let's listen to it and chat about it on the other side.
The auto pen, I think, is maybe one of the biggest scandals that we've had in 50 to 100 years. This is a tremendous scandal. And I guarantee you he knew nothing about what he was signing. I guarantee it. So they're going to figure it out, and we'll see what happens.
Biggest scandal in history. They are going to figure it out. Who are the they? And Isaac, what do you think about what Mr. Trump just had to say?
Well, as it applies to the pardons in particular, our reporting in the book is that Biden, these were the actions that were in some ways nearest to his heart. His concern about his son Hunter was actually what he was most concerned about during that month of June when he was preparing for that fateful debate with Trump where he performed so badly. And he made that decision about pardoning Hunter during a Thanksgiving trip right after the election. The family went to Nantucket. Hunter gave the then president a dossier that his lawyers had prepared criticizing the prosecution. And that was when Biden decided that he was not only going to pardon him, which he had previously said he wouldn't do, but that he would go further and criticize the Justice Department for playing politics, which dismayed many Democrats because that was the argument that Trump had been making. And Biden just undermined his own administration officials' claims, insistence that they were just following the law.
And Isaac, in the book, you all also mentioned how there were aides who were concerned about his son's influence over the president.
Yeah, another one of our findings was the extent of Hunter's involvement was more than understood at the time. In particular, there was a meeting on the day of the Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity that was just a small group of senior White House officials, and it was a Zoom meeting, and all of a sudden a voice popped up that people didn't immediately recognize, and the voice was off camera, and it was eventually they realized that it was Hunter Biden who was speaking, and the White House counsel thought that that was inappropriate for the president's son to be weighing in on a very sensitive political and legal issue.
Isaac, you and your colleagues, you center on the three campaigns that were running at that time. Not only Kamala Harris, but Mr. Biden and Mr. Trump himself. You talk about how, because of those campaigns and that disastrous debate performance, that's when the conversation started to swirl around whether or not Joe Biden should stay in the race.
Well, but from the beginning, most Democrats, a majority of Democrats, did not want Biden to run. They thought he was too old. And that was something that his advisors just ignored. Just thought that they could muscle through using the power of the presidency, redesigning the primary calendar to favor him, and trying to prevent any credible challengers in the primary. Another major finding was that there were many Democrats of the next generation who were eager to jump into the race right after the midterms and push Biden aside. But when the Democrats performed better in the midterms, Biden's team claimed that as a validation, and those other Democrats backed off.
Isaac Arnsdorf, I want to thank you again for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Right now, President Trump is holding a luncheon for the White House Faith Office, and he's speaking now. Let's listen in.
So, a little different. A little different. Hi, John. So we're really, that's a big thing. And we thought we had 4 deals, Howard, right, with Putin. Somehow they end and we get off the phone. Oh, that was a very nice conversation. And then he sends missiles into buildings someplace. I say, what was that all about?